Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Today, we're going to continue to talk about idioms that have to do with countries or the people who come from those countries. And last time, we introduced you to a couple. We talked about the phrase, pardon my French.
Yeah.
I think we also touched on, it's all Greek to me. And then we also mentioned the Irish goodbye, which neither you nor I had heard of before. But I guess this may be used more often in Britain. We've got some other ones as well that we didn't mention here, like pardon my French is one. If you swear too much, you can say that. Or if you want to describe yourself as being a romantic person, you can say, oh, I like to French kiss. You know, that's something you may say. I can't think of any other ones for Ireland, but there are other ones that we haven't mentioned here. We'll try to mention them as we go. But today, we're going to talk about some other ones in our lesson. One that has to do with Holland or Holland, the Netherlands, and the other one has to do with good old China.
Yeah, so we've got Dutch courage, all the tea in China. So those are really interesting as well. So we're going to get started by going through. We're going to read day 2, guys, and then we'll be back to talk about some of these phrases.
Dutch courage. With each idiom, we learn more about England's rivals from throughout the country's history. In the 19th and 18th centuries, the British and Dutch weren't just trade competitors. They also fought 4 wars. It shouldn't surprise you by this point to learn that English thus has insulting idioms related to Dutch people's morals and virtues. Dutch courage is that false bravery that comes from alcohol. It's an inauthentic and fragile courage. Example, I know you're anxious about your presentation, but don't have a drink beforehand. Dutch courage never lasts. All the tea in China. As a twist, the final idiom we'll encounter today has no negative implications. Despite Britain's generally hostile relations with China dating back to the Ming Dynasty, all the tea in China has both a positive meaning and a straightforward history. Not only was tea exceptionally profitable as a trade cargo from China, but China has also long been known as a vast country of people who value tea highly. For these reasons, saying that you wouldn't do something for all the tea in China shows that you wouldn't do something for any price, no matter how high. Example, that job sounds like a nightmare. I wouldn't take it for all the tea in China. It is a great pleasure to communicate clearly in a new language. However, few things are more thrilling in the study of a language than finally understanding some odd phrases. We hope the histories behind these idioms inspire you to look more closely at English phrases you come across.
Okay, guys, let's look at the first one. We've got Dutch courage. So we're talking about Holland, the Dutch. And it says here, with each idiom, we learn more about England's rivals from throughout the country's history. So in the 17th and 18th centuries, the British and Dutch weren't just trade competitors. They also fought 4 wars.
Ooh.
So, yeah, the Dutch were quite strong early on. They lost some of the power as time moved on, but they did have quite a lot of power back in the 17th and 18th centuries. So if you're competitors, here they're trade competitors, meaning they both have some goods they want to sell or trade with another country. And if you're trade competitors, it sounds like you're both trying to sell similar products. And you want to do better than they do. You want to sell more than they do. So they were trade competitors. Yeah, sometimes when you have a competitor, you could have a pretty good relationship, or you could really hate each other. It's kind of like a rivalry that we talked about earlier. Not all rivals hate each other, but you get kind of passionate about fighting them because you want to win. Everybody wants to win. No one wants to lose.
They don't indeed. And of course, if you're talking about Holland or the Netherlands, the adjective is the Dutch. And the English thought that thus insulting idioms for the Dutch were appropriate because they didn't like the Dutch people. So yeah, it shouldn't surprise you by this point to learn that English thus has insulting idioms related to Dutch people's morals and virtues. Now, if something is insulting, it insults you. It's something mean that you don't like to hear. Boy, you're really fat and ugly. That would be an insult to somebody. Or you might insult somebody by saying, you're really lazy and you really run your company terribly. Your employees all hate you. That's kind of insulting someone as well.
It's not a great way to make friends, that's for sure. So be careful with your words. It's funny that the English came up with so many insulting phrases. Of course, English is my language. I would like to be more fluent in some of these other languages just to see what insults they came up with for people who speak English. I know that the Europeans have their own insults for Americans, that's for sure. So anyway, we've got the English who came up with this insulting idiom, Dutch courage. At first glance, it looks like, oh, that would be good. If you have courage, that means you're brave. How could that be insulting? Well, it's how they define Dutch courage. Dutch courage to them, when they came up with this phrase, just meant false bravery. You kind of act like you're brave, but you're really faking it. You're not really brave because you're drunk at the time. Drunk people often will brag about something or, threaten another guy. Two guys will start fighting because, some stupid fight. If you're drunk, you tend to overestimate your strength and your brain power. And so, yeah, it's a false bravery. And it's inauthentic. They're saying inauthentic is another way to say fake or false. And it's a fragile courage. What is fragile, Tom?
It's easily broken. So again, you might rely on a little booze, a little alcohol to boost your courage when at other times you probably wouldn't dare to say something to your boss or to your enemy, to the big bully. Yeah, if you get some alcohol in your body, you may, be more brave to do something. That might apply to boys too if they want to ask a girl out on a date. Maybe they'll have a drink first to loosen themselves up. So we have this phrase, Dutch courage, and it goes on here with an example. I know you're anxious about your presentation, but don't have a drink beforehand. Dutch courage never lasts. That is true. You might be nervous or anxious about a presentation that you're going to give in your company. All the executives and the managers are going to be in the meeting, gathered around a meeting table. Maybe 20 people are going to be in there, and you've got to give a presentation, and it needs to be professional, and you don't want to look dumb or stupid when you do it. So maybe you're going to be anxious about it, but somebody here advises the person not to have Dutch courage. Don't have a drink beforehand. You'll probably just make it worse.
Yeah, usually if you drink, it affects your judgment, and that's the last thing you want to have affected if you're presenting in front of coworkers or your boss. Company holiday parties usually have a problem with folks who exhibit or show some of this Dutch courage. They've had a little to drink and they tend to talk too much or say the wrong thing or challenge somebody because somebody else said something that was a little bit rude to them or insulting. So you need to be careful. When you drink, you just don't have the ability to make good judgments like you normally would.
We should mention a more common idiom, at least for me, to go Dutch. That is a phrase you use when you go out to eat with somebody and you don't want to have one person pay for the whole meal. You just say, let's go Dutch. You pay for your food, I'll pay for mine, etc. That is not so common here in Taiwan. It seems like somebody always wants to pay. Oh, I'll pay this time. No, you paid last time. I'll get it this time. Well, maybe I'm wrong on that, but Westerners seem to more prefer going Dutch. Dutch. Let's just go Dutch. Let's pay our own way.
It's easier.
Et cetera. Okay. Now, let's talk about China, okay? All the tea in China.
Oh, we didn't talk about the presentation, though.
Oh, well, presentation, of course, is something you do when you present something. It's like giving a speech. You're demonstrating something in a meeting. This would not be something done in school so much. You might give a report in school, but if you give a presentation, to me, this is something that you would do in the office with all of your coworkers present.
Yeah, unless you're in business school and then you do give presentations. Now, you don't have to have a PowerPoint file or a PPT file, as you guys like to call them. You can just get up and talk. That's a presentation. And usually you're trying to persuade someone to accept a proposal or agree with your point of view. Maybe your department is looking for a higher budget, some more money that you can spend. That's a presentation. So yeah, it's definitely not a good time to drink before those presentations, especially if your boss is there. Moving on, guys, we're going to talk about all the tea in China. But you know what, Tom? Maybe we should take a quick break here. We'll listen to our Chinese teacher first, and then we'll be back to talk about this next idiom.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天又要来看一下第二天的道地国家片语大集合。先复习一下昨天说的 Pardon my French, excuse my French， 请原谅我讲法文，不是请原谅我讲脏话。好，另外一个 Irish goodbye， 不是说爱尔兰语哦，是所谓的不告而别，很粗鲁的行为。那今天我们再来看一下第三个叫做 Dutch courage，酒后之勇酒胆好，到底英国人跟荷兰人又有什么样的仇呢？我们来看一下这个仇啊，其实就是因为荷兰本来也就是英国的这个竞争对手嘛。因为在西元17、18世纪的时候，他们除了是贸易竞争对手之外，还打了4场战争呢。在这个 Dutch courage 这一段当中，我们看到了第2句的地方，第2句后面我们看到的是 it 有一个虚主词 it shouldn't surprise you， 这一件事情不应该要惊讶你。为什么不能惊讶你呢？为什么到这一点还不能让你惊讶呢？真主词在后面 to learn 一直到句尾的地方。好，这句话呢感觉有一点这个复杂哦，所以我们来看一下第3句。首先一开始这里的 it 是虚主词，真主词从后面的 to learn 到句尾，可是在这里的 learn 不是学，而是 know 知道。知道什么事呢？后面的 that 一直到句尾是 know 的受词，所以及物动词后面的 that 其实是可以省略的嘛。那到底知道什么事啊？你不应该感到讶异，因为你知道英文因此就是有跟荷兰人的道德啊、美德啊相关的一些侮辱的谚语。那在这里还有一个简化的限定用法关系子句，先行词是 insulting idioms 侮辱性的片语，后面 related 一直到句尾 virtues 可以先左右括号起来。省略的是什么呢？省略的就是冠带 which 或 that，还有 be 动词 are， 因为我们说 be related to something 就是和什么什么有关。好，所以在这一段当中第3句要特别注意。不过呢，在这里我们说 Dutch courage 就是所谓的酒后之勇嘛。酒后是喝酒之后有些人发酒疯啊，特别勇敢或乱七八糟之类的，这种酒后之勇当然是一种虚伪的虚假的勇敢，是不真实而且脆弱的。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's continue with our lesson. We got done talking about Dutch courage or going Dutch. Is that Greek to you? Do you understand that? Hopefully, we've helped you understand that better. Let's talk about a phrase called all the tea in China. We'll explain this to you and we'll tell you how to use it in a sentence. And as a twist, the final idiom we'll encounter today has no negative implications. Now, a twist is something you don't expect in the plot line of a story. So far we've been talking talking about idioms that insult people. They're kind of negative, and you would use these only if you want to insult people. But this one, it has a bit of a twist. It's actually positive. It might depend on who's using this phrase, but it really has no negative implications.
No.
So an implication means you're implying something or you're suggesting something is true, but you're not coming out and saying it directly. So it doesn't really have any negative implications. It's actually pretty positive.
I think so too. Now think about this, how much tea exists in China. And this was created hundreds of years ago. So think back to when China was first opened up to foreigners. Foreigners could go in. They probably were astonished at all the tea there that was being grown. So all the tea in China has to do with the fact there's a lot of tea. So let's talk about the situation where you can use it. So despite Britain's generally hostile relations with China dating back to the Ming Dynasty, all the tea in China, as Tom said, has both a positive meaning and a straightforward history. It's not too complicated. It's pretty straightforward as opposed to some of the others that we've introduced, which are a little bit more complex, and they aren't very straightforward. You have to actually look it up to guess what the origin of the phrase would be. So if something dates back to something, that means that's when it started. That was its origin. Yeah, it dates back. Our friendship dates back to 1990. You could use it in many different ways, but you'll often see it when you're talking about historical things and when something started to exist.
Exactly. So this may not come from England directly, but of course, this is related to the relationship between England and China. And of course, the phrase all the tea in China has both a positive meaning and a straightforward history, a history that we can talk about without any problem. Not only was tea exceptionally profitable as a trade cargo from China, but China has also long been known as a vast country of people who value tea highly. Okay, so we've got a couple of ways we look at tea, or at least how we look at China. Tea is not only really profitable, but it's also from China, which is a huge country as well. Now, something's exceptionally profitable. That means it's really very much profitable. This is kind of hard to say. Exceptionally profitable. Very, very profitable. It is so profitable that it's not really been equaled by anything else in the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. So, exceptionally profitable. Now, it was a trade cargo from China. We use the word cargo when we're talking about the shipping of goods, not people. We don't talk about people as cargo. We talk about goods that are produced for trade or for sale. They can be carried on a ship. Nowadays, a lot of we have cargo ships that go from one country to another. They can go on an aircraft, like some of these fast delivery services like DHL and FedEx. They have cargo planes. And the only thing on the plane besides the two pilots is a bunch of goods that have been put on there, and they're going to a country to be sold to someone. So those are cargo planes, cargo ships. You could also talk about cargo being transported in a big truck as well.
Indeed. And of course, tea comes from the Chinese language. I think it comes from Minnan, the Minnan language, limde, to eat tea or drink tea, I should say. And of course, they spell it with a T, so it's pronounced tea in English. But in other places, it's called chai because that's based on cha, depending on the dialect you're using to form the word. But we're talking about China being a vast country of people who value tea highly. So if you say China has a lot of tea, well, that's probably very true. China is a huge country. Chinese people love to drink tea. So you can make the educated guess that China has a lot of tea.
It's been known as a vast country of people who value tea highly. Vast just means really, really big. We use it when we talk about something that is so big, it's hard to say exactly to what extent it reaches. So to a great extent, you can use it for quantity, but you can also use it for space. So an immense space, immense area of land, and it has a lot of people, and they value tea highly, as you know. For these reasons, saying that you wouldn't do something for all the tea in China shows that you wouldn't do something for any price, no matter how high. Tom and I talked about this before we started the program, and I said, I don't really always look at this phrase as being in terms of a dollar amount or money. I just think about someone saying it to show you how determined they are. They would never do it, no matter what. You could offer them anything, and they would still not do it, determined not to do it. So, yeah, this is when you really want to emphasize there's no way you'd ever do something. So you could offer them, I don't know, a trip around the world, and they still wouldn't do it. So here's the example. That job sounds like a nightmare. I wouldn't take it for all the tea in China. There's no way I'd ever take that job.
Yeah, my mom used this phrase quite a bit.
Oh, yeah?
Like if she had some secret information. Mom, can you tell me the secret, please? I wouldn't tell you for all the tea in China. So it's often used in that pattern.
That's cute.
Wouldn't tell you. I wouldn't take this job.
I wouldn't do it for. Yeah.
Exactly, for all the tea in China, which means, hey, you're willing to sacrifice a great fortune by keeping a secret or not doing something. So there you have it. Some phrases that come from Holland, France, and Ireland, and also China.
I just found another one, Tom.
Okay.
I was in phrases.org.uk, and there is another one that is concerning China. I haven't heard this one. They use it more in the UK than they do in the US, but it's called Chinese whispers. It's the game where you sit around and you whisper a sentence, and then it goes from one person to another. And by the time it gets to the last person, it's changed completely. In the US, we call that game telephone or gossip, but usually telephone. But it came about because people couldn't understand the Chinese language, and they felt like it was just a bunch of incomprehensible blah, 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 blah when people were speaking. Now, before they called it Chinese whispers, just so you know, the British don't have anything against the Chinese. I think they have bigger enemies than the Chinese. They used to say Russian whispers. The Russian language was also very difficult for the Europeans to comprehend. So, yeah, they just kind of coined that phrase, meaning we can't understand anything that's going on.
Speaking of Russia, of course, there's a phrase called Russian roulette, but I won't explain that to you right now. It's kind of violent. And then there's the Mexican standoff, where you have three people pointing guns at each other. That one's used sometimes in movies, like in Tarantino movies. They often have that.
Or old westerns.
Like the last scene in Pulp Fiction there, they had the Mexican standoff situation.
Yeah, who's going to win in that one if they're all pointing guns at each other?
In a triangle, basically.
Good luck.
But there you go. And, of course, there are lots of phrases from other countries as well. So here's our final paragraph. It says, it is a great pleasure to communicate clearly in a new language. Indeed, as you get better at a language, it's more and more fun to be able to speak in that language without stuttering through every sentence or looking stuff up in your dictionary. However, few things are more thrilling in the study of a language than finally understanding some odd phrases. Yes, indeed, when I learn Mandarin Chinese, I learn all the basic words, but when these idioms come out or these slang terms come out, I'm lost. You know, what the heck are they talking about with that phrase? So if you can understand some of those unusual phrases, then indeed you're making progress.
Now, there is one more verb phrase here on the last sentence. You can see it. If you come across something, you run into it, you meet it or find it by accident, or maybe you're just communicating with somebody and you come across a phrase you've never heard before. So you just kind of run into it without having planned to hear it or be introduced to it, to come across. It's fun to come across new phrases. You can also come across different different things. Like if you're a shopper, you can be out shopping and come across a great new shop or store that has goods that you really enjoy that you can introduce to others, or come across a new restaurant or anything that you just find without actually knowing about it in advance. It's kind of fun.
You will encounter those phrases as you watch movies or talk to people or check out your social media posts. Okay, that ends our discussion. Let's now listen to our Chinese teacher one more time.
接着我们就来看一下 All the tea in China 中国所有的茶中国难道也跟英国中间又有什么世仇吗？没有，还好这个谚语没什么负面的意义啦。这个 All the tea in China 真的不是什么字面上中国所有的茶，它其实就指的是大笔的财富或者是天大的好处。不过当然一开始用这个片语用 tea 的时候是有一些历史的啦。好，虽然英国跟中国在整体这个敌对是有一些关系，而且从明朝就已经开始，但是在这个 all the tea in China 就特别指的是很多钱、很多好处的意思。不过我们在这里要先看一下第二句哦。一开始的 despite 是一个介系词，虽然尽管。这个介系词呢，你也可以说是三个字 in spite of INSPITE OF。它也是介系词片语，或者我们说的 regardless of REGRADLESS 再加一个 OF， 它都有不顾不管啊尽管啊这样的状况。尽管英国 generally 它通常跟中国之间的 relations 是有点 hustle 是有点敌对的，后面的 dating 一直到逗点前面的 Ming Dynasty 要左右括号，它是限定用法关系子句的简化哦。Dating 还原是which或 that， 再加上动词的 date。注意不要再加 s 了，因为前面的这个 relations 是复数。好，那当然追溯到明朝这样子的一个关系，在我们这一次的片语当中 ，all the tea in China 是正面的意义啦吼。因为为什么要特别提茶叶呢？茶叶它作为一个来自中国的贸易货物啊，它的利润很丰厚，而且中国长期以来就是高度重视茶叶的一个大国嘛，所以茶是很有价值的。再来第三句，我们又看到 not only but also 啦，我们这个高一就学过，这个很熟悉的耶。可是 not only 如果放在句首的时候，就要形成倒装哦。这个倒装请特别注意一下，我们要澄清。Not only 的倒装仅止于 not only 之后到逗点这个子句 but 之后的句子是不用倒装的，所以我们逗点之前的 not only 的倒装它到底长什么样子？长得像疑问句一样，把 be 动词或助动词放在主词的前面，所以我们看到的是 be 动词 was tea如何如何。我们在 not only 这个子句只是描述茶在中国的贸易货物，它是一个利润丰厚的一种，所以直接用 be 动词 Not only was tea exceptionally profitable as a trade cargo from China， 那逗点之后的 but 就不用形成倒装啦。可是在这里 but China 后面我们看到还有一个关系子句，那先行词就是 a vast country of people， 就是一个大国。Who 到句尾左右括号限定，这个大国是怎样呢？ Who value tea highly， 相当重视茶。好，所以以上根据这些原因呢 ，all the tea in China 当然指的就是大笔财富或天大的好处啦。所以下次你就可以说啊，你要我做那件事情，那个工作不行哦，你给我 all the tea in China， 我也不会去做的，也可以这样子用。好，那么昨天跟今天呢，我们就带大家介绍了4个片语 Pardon my French, Irish goodbye, Dutch courage, all the tea in China， 大家要学着用哦。我是 Anna， 我们下次见。
That's it for today. Thank you for joining us, and make sure you join us again next time for another edition of our program. We'll certainly have some surprises for you then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
And I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.